but I want to share quite a few things during this presentation. And if you don't know me, my name's Mark Anderson. I'm known as the ICT evangelist, and it's a really great pleasure to partner with Ronan on the Global EdTech project. During this session, I'm hoping to share lots of different perspectives with you, but I want to take a step back to an event that I spoke at in Dubai back in November 2018. In that event, I shared this sort of prediction: the future of education will involve teachers using AI to simplify formative assessment to provide personalised learning opportunities. Here we are, January 2021, just over 2 years later. And how much are we seeing of this? We're seeing so much of this being the case. And it doesn't even have to be some of the more sort of whiz-bang tools. We heard from Rose, Professor Rose Luckin, right at the outset today about the ways in which the artificial intelligence can really help and support some of these burdensome tasks of educators in the classroom. So I wanted to sort of share that as a bit of a predictive thing for the future, because AI can be as many have shared during the course of the day today so far, can have a huge impact on improving how things work in your school. And a shout out for the person who's sharing just after me, Ollie Lewis. And this is him at the Guess Education Awards back last 18 months ago, where he won the Guess Award for the implementation of technology in his school, British International School, Abu Dhabi, for their use and setup of Century Tech. Century Tech is a really well-known piece of EdTech software that uses learning science, cognitive psychology, artificial intelligence, and neuroscience to help deliver personalized learning pathways. It supports teachers being able to spend time with the learners. Data is information without a context, and what the AI in Century does is it gives the data generated through the activities that learners do and to give them context. And coining the term of Dr. Adam England, head teacher of a school in Lagos that I was speaking to recently, he calls it not information, he calls it wisdom. And the wisdom that you can gain from these platforms can massively reduce workload, but really as educators and teachers and leaders where students are at with their learning. And it's a great way to supplement and reduce workload in your classroom. Now, the use of AI doesn't have to be all whiz bang though. Simple AI sitting behind the scenes in some of your more regularly used tools like PowerPoint, with your quick starter template, for example, or the AI behind the scenes that automatically puts alt text for accessibility onto photos when you drag them into PowerPoint. There are lots of little things that we can do, and Bookie mentioned in her session about accessibility being something that's important to move forwards with and develop further into the future. I completely agree. And using simple things like that alt text generator automatically in PowerPoint is a great example of how that can make things more accessible, but without having to do the work and saving teachers time. I got the chance to speak to Gustavo Calderon de Anda, who's from Mexico. He's top 50 finalist of the Global Teacher Prize back in 2020. He's also one of our authors at Global EdTech. And we asked him, what will be the major EdTech trends in 2021? We wanted to make sure we had great representation from all of the continents around the world. And he shared 3 things in the conversation that we had. He shared that there's going to be AI, like I've shared then, being a way to guarantee the personalization of learning. That can be massively impactful and helpful. And we see that in the example I shared using Century Tech as one such tool for that purpose. Also, virtual reality, so we can enhance learning experiences. I'm doing a session later today with a school in Barcelona, for example, and we're exploring how we can use iPad and AR to improve oracy and literacy, for example. There are so many ways in which we can use compelling technologies to help push the boundaries forward and help learning, make it more relevant, and support the teaching and learning activities of the young people that we serve in our schools. He also shared the importance of big data. More and more, increasingly so, schools are using things like Google Data Center and Power BI from Microsoft to help make these informed decisions. Again, going back to that adage from Dr. Adam England about it being wisdom, and this wisdom that we need as educators to help us move these things forward, but sort of saving us time in the process of doing that by doing a lot of the legwork for us. For me, though, what's really important is thinking really carefully about what works. In a world where, you did that famous quote, in a world where you can be anything, be kind. Well, in a world where you can use any edtech, make sure you use edtech that's going to work, that's going to help you as a teacher, going to help learners be able to access the information, the content you're sharing, so forth and so on. Sometimes that's just simple things, connectivity. But without all these things, without these conditions for success, things aren't going to work. But having a firm evidence base is super important, I think. So with that in mind, thinking about some research from the likes of the Education Endowment Foundation, they share that one way in which where EdTech can have some impact is with the quality of explanations and modelling. So if knowing that this can actually have an impact and help teachers, then what can you do to actually achieve those things? Well, it could be simple things like using animations in your presentations. It could be all sorts of things. But again, keeping yourself focused and thinking about what works will really help to keep you honest with what it is you're trying to do with technology, regardless of whether it's 2021 or 2031. Technology can really help with assessment and feedback too. Just using voice feedback, for example, can be a massive, again, far more accessible than written or typed feedback. But again, using your voice really helps connect. And we've heard a few people today sharing about the importance and power of relationships, as Hattie shares. One of the most impactful strategies you can have is developing those strong relationships with your learners. Again, this data comes from the Education Endowment Foundation about assessments and feedback. And it leads through to this idea of generating these personalized pathways. We saw this before with Century. And these are things that can really be done through technology to help teachers be far more, not the sage on the stage, but the guide on the side, to really help with those timely interventions and dealing with fixing any sort of misconceptions that learners may have. But the thing is, the key with all these amazing things that we can do with technology, what about when things go a little bit wrong? Because sometimes, when you're using technology, you might feel like you're these guys from the Ferrari team on the Rossa ride at Ferrari World in Abu Dhabi. But the reality sometimes is actually a bit more like this child going down this slide on the right-hand side. How can we find that sweet spot? How can we make it so that what we're doing with our technology is going to be impactful now, next week, next month, next year, next decade? Well, again, it goes back to thinking, I think, really importantly about what actually works in education, and that's why I really love the work that Professor Rose Luckin does. This is something that I've been sharing many times over the years. How are we going to move our teachers from this point down here where they're in survival and worried about using the technology to mastery and impact and innovation? So more often than not, it's not the technology that's the issue, although today we have had actual technology issues. But what's important sometimes isn't what's in front of you with the technology. Sometimes it's a problem somewhere between the technology and the chair, if you know what I'm saying. So what can we do to scaffold and provide support for people so they can move through these levels and stages? Well, one way you can do it is making sure that you sort of keep that depth of challenge. You don't use gimmicky technology. Just because you can do something with technology doesn't necessarily, I think, mean that you should use things just for engagement reasons, let's say. And I always go back to this banana principle, where it's not so much what you do, it's the way that you do it that's important. Using breakout rooms like Brett was advocating for earlier to increase engagement and have students really on track with everything and pushing themselves and being enthusiastic about their learning. It's a great way of using a platform. OneNote was never made for this activity, but the activity increases engagement and activity and ultimately learning through the platform when you employ these kinds of ideas and activities. And a healthy dose of so what, when someone says, well, you can do this in Teams. Well, so what? Just because we can do together mode, why would we do that? Well, the great thing is flip it. Have the question with yourself, so what? And then think, well, if I can say so that, and there's a compelling evidence-based reason as to why you might choose to do that thing later on, then that's a great way of helping keep you honest. Because technology is going to keep moving faster and faster and faster and faster, and we can't keep up with it as humans, and we can do our very best, and you'll always have early adopters and thought leaders and all these different people, but we're only ever as good as our lowest common denominator. And so moving ourselves through, having these simple things in the back of our head, why am I using it? So what? Just because I can use it? So that, and having that in the back of your head will always, I think, help keep you on track and honest. So what are you looking for? You're looking for a compelling case for change. You're looking for a pandemic. No, you're not looking for a pandemic, but the pandemic definitely gives us a compelling case for change for technology moving forwards into the future. So what can we do about it? Well, and what's needed? Well, we need investment. We need to have evidence, and we need to have replicable benefits, and we need to have loads and loads and loads of CPD. And with investment and replicable benefits and all of these things, that's where I think the future of EdTech lies. Because the weakest thing sometimes, as I shared, isn't necessarily the technology at times, it's the confidence and competence of our teachers who need so much support. You know, making sure the infrastructure is there, making sure the conditions for success are there is really important. But CPD need to sit at the heart of anything that you do. And for me, that's the future for EdTech. Thank you so much for giving me a little platform to share for a few moments there. I hope you found those points compelling and relevant.